Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. It's been an energy-intensive week, with the Energy Department releasing a draft update to the country's electricity roadmap and State Power Utility reporting interim earnings. Terence Creamer has been reporting on developments and joins me to talk about some of the key themes. Hi Terence. A draft of the long-awaited update to the Integrated Resource Plan has been published. What caught your eye in the proposed plan?
I think that, first of all, it is a draft and it's really open for public comment. And I think there's going to be quite a lot of comment on this update. As you say as well, long awaited, the Integrated Resource Plan for electricity, there was a sort of a small one, then the main one came out for 2010. Actually, it was promulgated in early 2011. And that plan really set in place the current build program that we kind of see happening around us, both from Eskom as well as some of the independent power producers. Eskom, we know about the Kusile, the Medupi and the Ngula power stations. And then there was the renewable investments that have taken place with three bidding rounds so far. And then there's the open cycle gas turbines, the private peakers that are also being built. And that really set the framework to allow those to happen, to allow those procurement processes to take place and to allow Eskom to move ahead with its build program. But in the interim, there's been changes to the economic environment and the energy equation. And basically, there's been a clamour to say, the Integrated Resource Plan is really out of date, mostly because the demand outlook for electricity has come under a lot of pressure because we, as an economy, are growing well below the aspirational targets set in the National Development Plan, but also those that were thought about in the Integrated Resource Plan. So there has been this work done to update the RP, and that was published on the Department of Energy's website this week, and it's now available for public comment until the 7th of February. And some of the key highlights, I think the big headline story that came out is that we need far less nuclear and later than first anticipated in the RP. And if demand is even lower, then it's even suggesting that no nuclear till way beyond that period of the 20-year horizon to 2030. So we'd only be looking at 2035 for the first nuclear capacity versus 2023 currently. But on the base case, it's basically saying we're going to have less nuclear, but coming in around 2025 with the first capacity. So that was the big screaming headline story, and there was quite a lot of media around that. But there were also a number of other aspects to the plan. There's far less coal in the plan, and in fact, any new coal that is built over the period, the plan suggests should come in the form of smaller coal-fired power stations by the private sector rather than mega-style plants, which contradicts maybe what Cabinet was and the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission are thinking around a coal-free type process to sort of follow on from Kusile and Medupi. So that's a big change as well, proposed change. And then there's the changes to the renewables with more solar in the mix, but less wind into the mix. And then there's also a desire to fill the gap left by nuclear, by less nuclear later, with imports from the region. So you can see that it's a new thinking, and really what drives that new thinking is that the terawatt hour usage by 2030 is quite a lot lower than what we were expecting if we had a really good pumping economy and a strong electricity demand growth, which we don't have at the moment. So the view is that about 6,600 megawatts of capacity that we thought we would have needed by 2030 will no longer be needed under the current plan. But as I say, it's a draft, it's an update report. There's now going to be a process for comment, and I think there's some of these areas are going to be quite highly contested, and we'll see ultimately what goes to Cabinet could be quite different, and what is eventually promulgated, which the suggestion is by March 2014, could also look significantly different from what we have. But it looks like an interesting change, and it takes account of the reality that we're in.
We then had Eskom releasing its interim results, at which a surprise announcement was made about its CEO.
Yes, I think it did take everyone by surprise. Brian Dahms came into the hot seat after there was a altercation at board level with the former CEO, Jacob Moroka, and Brian Dahms moved in 2010 to take up that role as CEO. And I think, although it's a highly difficult job, and one that I think there's a lot of derision around Eskom and public unhappiness about what's been happening with electricity prices. On the whole, I think people were feeling the performance of Brian Dahms is fairly good. But in recent months, there have been a number of not new, but the old issues coming back around supply-demand balances. And we've had to switch off ask for emergency measures, specifically from the industrial users. And then we've had these worries again about Medupi and new delays around Medupi. It seemed, the question was posed whether this was a pressured decision that was dismissed out of hand by Brian Dahms, who said that this was not a pressured decision that was forced upon him. He made it on his own, but no real elaboration as to why the decision was made. And it comes, at a time when certain key milestones are just about to happen next year, and the most important of which is the second half switch on of the first unit at Medupi. Now, there's concern about that because we've already had the delay to the second half because of the boiler welding problems, which seem to be, according to Hitachi, mostly in hand. But there have been these worries about the control and instrumentation aspects. And Eskom confirmed that it has moved to have almost a parallel process around the boiler protection systems, and has contracted with an alternative supply to Alstom. They didn't confirm that it was Siemens, but it's in the public domain that it's Siemens. And it seems that there is concern now that if they're having to go with another supplier this late in the game, whether that date is now secure. So it is a difficult time because he will be leaving at the end of March, and Medupi is only scheduled to come on in the second half of the year, so that's well ahead of that. And I suppose it's also difficult in the sense that the board has to now have another issue to juggle around finding a suitable replacement, which I think is a tall order because Brian Dahms is he spent 25 years at the organisation, knows it well, and I think was a key stabilising force at the organisation when that is really being hit from all sides. And I think the new CEO, whoever that is going to have to immediately grasp the nettle around this big financial gap that of about 225 billion that's going to confront Eskom really in the latter 3 years of the MRPD3, or the price determination period that runs to 2018. And that's no mean feat either, because that's a lot of money that is short, and they are going to have to find clever strategies and cajole maybe their shareholder to come in with support. They're also going to have to raise more debt, all at a time when their main product that they sell is in less and less demand, with another fall off in electricity sales in the first half of this year. So all in all, as you say, a surprise and a shock announcement, and one I suppose that from a personal decision, many can understand because of the taxing nature of the job, but from the importance of 2014 from an Eskom perspective is somewhat eyebrow raising.
Given these developments, what do you think the outlook is for the electricity sector in 2014?
Well, I think the main theme is that decisions now need to be made again, in another phase of decision making. One, what does the roadmap look like? Do we delay nuclear by the extent, or do we push it right off the agenda to the extent maybe outlined in the IRP draft update? Do we pursue coal in the manner that is suggested, which seems to be in more bite-sized pieces? Those are very big decisions that have to be made. Mostly, I suppose, on the coal side, mostly because some traction has been gained and lessons have been learned around the mega projects. And I think there's a view that maybe we should take those lessons into a third project and get it done. But it's also becoming clearer that it's going to be harder and harder to fund these mega coal projects. DFI, development finance, is going to be harder and harder to secure for coal. Even straight bank and international finance, commercial finance for coal is going to become harder to obtain, just because of the climate change dilemma and the need to address or to meet our commitments in that area, as well as global commitments in that area, and the pressure is going to be rising. So I think, again, decision time around the plan. For Eskom, the business model review that has been underway now for some months since the determination came out, then that needs to be bedded down in terms of their strategy. There's some very big decisions to be held there, and I think the biggest, look, they've decided that they're going to go for more debt, 50 billion rand more. That's nothing to sneeze at. And then they are, I think, looking at where they can clean up on the capex and opex and really make things more efficient. But there's, I think, the message coming out more and more that there's only so much they can do. So I think 2014 could also be a horrible year from a consumer perspective, in the sense that we could see Eskom driving up the M1 using their e-toll and the e-tag and driving to nurse's door and asking for a reopener.
Thank you. That's the Second Take Show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.